Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Justice. I believe today is our 50th episode that we're airing. So almost a full year that we have been going on with this program. And again, we have to start out by saying thank you to our listeners, those who are joining us on Radioland 99 FM, but also those who continue to be with us on social media. My name is Mikkel Jackson, Executive Director for JFJ. Jade Williams, the Policy and Advocacy Specialist who normally co-hosts with me, she will not be here today, so you have just the pleasure of my company for the next hour. Also to indicate our YouTube platform is down at the moment, and I believe so too is the Bridges website. But nevertheless, we will have the recording put up on YouTube. So for those who may have missed the program, there's still an opportunity to pay attention to what is happening. Just want to remind you as well of our studio line, so you can call in on the second half of the program. That's 676-4996, 676-4996. And you can also WhatsApp your views to us at 239-7583. Now, before we get into the topic of today and have the discussion in terms of the right of the day and the trivia, you know, in looking at last week's recap, there's some cause for concern, but there's also some good things that emerged. The nation was privy to an unfortunate incident that took place at the B.B. Koch High School, where a grade 11 student assaulted a grade 7 student, I believe. His name is Jaheim Coleman, because there are allegations that the young man stepped on the shoes of the older student who responded with violence. And the circumstances brought shock to us. We're pleased to advise that Jaheim he's recovering quite well based on reports in the media and having listened to an interview where his mom participated, I think yesterday, I believe. And the accused teenager, grade 11 boy, he is now facing criminal charges, assault occasioning grievous bodily harm, which I think carries a maximum term of 3 years. And I believe he was also suspended for 10 days from school. There are a couple things to note, and I believe it's important at JFJ as we look through this scenario to obviously lend support to the parent of the accused, because in all of this we can't ignore that a child was involved. And we always have to ask the question, what would have brought a child to act in the manner in which the accused did? And I think, and I heard the Minister of Education saying that they're going to be scaling up restorative justice in schools. JFJ, we have been calling for it as part of the interventions necessary to deal with youth involvement in gangs and so on. But I think we need to broaden it in scope, that it's not just the at-risk communities where children can be involved in gangs are going to be participating in the restorative justice initiative that is going to be done in schools, conflict resolution, life skills empowerment. I think it needs to be broadened as an initiative that every school at both primary and secondary level is participating in. And we don't want to bring another burden to teachers, because I think they have enough dealing with in the classroom. I think we need to look at the resource officers perhaps being better equipped and trained in this area, more of them being deployed. But it has to be something that is more wide scale. Because I think when we look at even another incident just this week, another child apparently stepped on another child's shoes, and again, a similar situation, not as bad as what Jaheim went through, would have happened. So we have to be asking the question, where are the guidance counselors, the support system for the parents? We saw another headline where the Minister of Education indicated that the parents are getting training, but much more still leaves or needs to be done. I also listened to the interview with Jaheim's mother. And what was remarkable to me is that young Jaheim said that he's willing to forgive the accused. And it shows his character and how well his parents have raised him. So, mother, our hats off to you and our hats off to young Jaheim as he recovers. But there are 4 other youngsters in this that brings hope to all that is happening in Jamaica, and I want our listeners to know their names. I have it here written. Kari Reed, Gary Bartley, Dejan Gordon, and Dejan Powell. These 4 youngsters, while others were busy recording the assault, these 4 youngsters lifted Jaheim up and brought him to a medical facility. And I think the Prime Minister will be recognizing all 4 later today in the House of Parliament. And I believe it's well deserved. Well deserved. And I won't focus on the negative to say where were the adults who were driving by while the 4 youngsters had the little boy airlifting through the community. The busy traffic. But let us focus on young Jaheim's willingness to forgive, but also these 4 youngsters' heroic act. Awesome young men they are. And let us be mindful and cognizant that notwithstanding the crime levels and all the negatives that we hear in the news, these 4 youngsters bring hope to Jamaica. Now, there are 2 other important developments within the child development sector I want to bring home or highlight. Dr. Kassan Troop, she has been promoted to permanent secretary in the Ministry of Education. And Miss Laurette Adams Thomas, she's now the Chief Executive Officer of the Child Protection and Family Services Agency. And these are important updates because we need some permanence and so on to these critical posts as we look at some of the interventions necessary for our youngsters. All right, so that is our human rights recap of the week. I want to highlight our right of the day, which is tied to the topic that we're going to be discussing, which is detained at pleasure and what persons who are mentally ill suffer through, where mental illness becomes a jail sentence. So one of the rights that we have, which is right to a fair trial, and we put in bracket here timely, is outlined in the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedom under section 16 subsection 1, and it continues under subsection 2 as well, where it says that in the Constitution of Jamaica, whenever any person is charged with a criminal offense, he shall, unless the charge is withdrawn, be afforded a fair hearing within a reasonable time by an independent and impartial court. So fair hearing is dependent on impartiality, independence of the court, but importantly, within a reasonable time. So we're going to be having conversations with Carla Gulato, the Executive Director of Stand Up for Jamaica, about how unreasonable the times have been for those who are mentally ill. But before we go into the conversation with Ms. Gulato, just to bring up our trivia, and it says Noel Chambers, the mentally ill prisoner who died after being in custody at the Tower Street Adult Correctional Facility, was detained for years without a trial. So how many years was Noel Chambers detained for without having a trial. So that is one trivia, and I want to add another for those who are watching. This Let's Start Justice is a rebranded program of JFJ. So I'm going to add a double trivia as we celebrate 50 episodes today. And the double trivia is asking you, what was the name of JFJ's first radio program and which radio station was it aired on? So what was the name of JFJ's first radio program and which radio station was it aired on at that time? All right? And if you answer that correctly, you get, we can be quite nice. Vanessa, you think $2,000 is too much? Or we should put it at 1,000? Vanessa and Kevin, they have both advocated for you to get $2,000 if you get that correctly, and that is separate from the question on Noel Chambers, all right? But let's get into the topic of today quickly, and then we take the break and come back with Carla Golato. Now, we said detained at pleasure, and for years, decades, we have seen where persons who are mentally ill have been detained without ever being charged, detained at the court's pleasure, detained at the Governor General's pleasure. In 2020, the findings of an independent commission of investigation, INDECOM report, shocked the nation as pictures emerged of Noel Chambers' emaciated body. So in other words, he was basically down to skin and bones. And for those who don't remember, Noel Chambers is a mentally ill man who died after spending several decades in prison without ever standing a trial because he was deemed unfit to plead, meaning the court found that he was not mentally fit to stand trial. All right. The other thing to point out was that in that INDECOM report in 2020, they also reported that they were aware of 146 mentally ill persons who are imprisoned without having been tried. And then in 2019, which was the year prior, the Legal Aid Council reported that it was aware of 313 such persons. So I think it's fair to say that with the absence of an audit, given that a number of people are lost in the prison system, we're not too sure of what the true number may be as a result. So much to think through there. We're going to be taking the break, and then I finish out with giving you some more background information on the topic. We take the break and we return. All right, welcome back to Let's Start Justice. I'm told that the YouTube platform is back up, so if you're not able to listen on radio, you can join us on YouTube. Now, we're discussing the matter of persons who are mentally ill, who are unfit to stand trial or not able to plead, how we have seen where they have been lost in the prison system. And just to quickly highlight that the Criminal Justice Administration Act does make provision for this, and it was amended in 2011, wherein no longer can someone be detained at the Governor General's pleasure, but they can still be detained at the court's pleasure. And there are a couple of orders that can be made by the court just the same, where that individual can be remanded in custody at the court's pleasure. The person can be committed to a psychiatric facility, or the person can be given a supervision and treatment order or a guardianship order, wherein depending at the type of mental illness that is there, the person can be released to the family. Now, despite these provisions, we all know the gaps in the institution, and Carla Golato is going to be talking to us a little bit about that. But since, Carla can correct me on the years, but JFJ and Stand Up for Jamaica, we have been partnering as an organization independently as well while we partner. And we have attorneys that have been working on these matters. Terence William, who is a former commissioner of INDECOM. John Clark, who is the board chair of Jamaicans for Justice. Our legal manager, Sashika Richards, who have been working to release persons who are mentally ill. I believe in 2019, through our efforts, we managed to secure the release, of 10 persons who had served as low as 19 years without standing trial to as high as 45 years. Just to put that in context. Carlo, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Michael. First of all, congratulations if it's your 50th anniversary. nice.
Yes, yes, thank you so much. The 50th episode. And thanks as usual, Carla. You are one of our partners that we can always count on to share good perspectives on the different issues.
Well,
yeah.
we have been working together on several matters for a long time, and we went a long way, even if we still have a lot of work to do, right?
Yes, absolutely.
One of the matters which is dear to both of us is access to justice. And the situation about the mentally ill that you just mentioned is a striking example of lack of access to justice. As a stand-up for Jamaica, we have a position which is stating that somebody which is not fit to plead, that means is a mentally ill person, should not end up into a prison. It should be assessed at the beginning of the trial, and once you figure out what a kind of challenge he has, should be sent to an institution which need to be cured and not punished for something that is not fully aware of. This is the basic statement, right? Mentally ill should not end up in a prison. By the way, for the prison is a big burden because prisons are not equipped to host them. So there are 2 psychiatrists which are visiting 4,000 inmates. So can you imagine a mentally ill what kind of professional assistance can receive? There is a block where they are isolated from other ones, and there is nothing in that block for them to do for the full day. No training, no little rehab, no medical care, nothing. They are abandoned there. I went to see the block more than once, and it is something which is really appalling. The only thing they receive is an injection, a monthly injection, which is keeping them more unsound, and therefore they look like vegetables for 2 weeks, and then they start to wake up, then they start to go back to normal, and then they get a second injection. That is what it is mostly in a prison. So that's not the case for them. Apart this, the other thing which is heavily unacceptable is what you mentioned before, that there are hundreds of mentally ill lost in the system. Once they are detained, they being unfit to plead, which for the most majority of people does not mean much, but I want to explain it. That means that you cannot take care of your case. You cannot sign a document, you cannot sign a paper, you cannot require a court order. There is nothing.
Can't take part in your own defense, yes.
Right, to organize your own defense. So they are depending from their families, or if they have an attorney, he will proceed according to his choices. That is not happening for the majority of them, because those which are abandoned there, they don't have anybody. So somebody which is in the system basically gets lost. You mentioned before the fact that they were under the Governor General pleasure, and then since 2011 they were transiting to court pleasure. Nobody knows that was almost impossible, because if those which were under the portfolio of the Governor General were transiting to the court, they had to sign the papers to do so. So most of them, they didn't even know that there was a paper, they didn't even know that they had to transit, and they were not anyhow able to sign for themselves.
Yes, because Carla, just to indicate, and I wanted to answer, one of the things that JFJ called for in 2022 was for the state not to place the burden on those with mental illness to make an application. Those who were detained under the Governor General's pleasure. But for the state, the greater burden must be on them to review those matters and see the status of those clients, those detainees rather, and transition them either to the other orders wherein they are placed in a psychiatric facility. If they are now fit to plead or stand trial, then the prosecution should commence, or a guardianship order is done. To date,
Right.
we're not aware from our end if anything of that nature was sorted. So if you could just specifically speak to that, what is the status of that transition?
It is particularly sad to realize that they are considered unfit to plead, but they are fit to suffer there.
Yeah.
Right? They are fit to bear the consequence of something which they cannot control or handle. The status of we started after the Indecom report, which was revealing to a lot of people what was the situation. We started an action with an amount of attorney, and there was also Isaac Buchanan among them, with the help of Indecom, trying to promote a civil action to get them out from the prison. Honestly, it has not been very successful because we were planning out of the 300 and more which were detained to get out at least those under the Governor General of Court pleasure, because they were detained since a minimum of 22 years to a maximum of 50 years.
Yes.
I don't want to tell you about Mr. Chambers because I know that you have somebody which has to answer for how many years he was detained, but it was a very long time.
Yeah.
So once we start that action, the amount of obstacles that we have been encountering were more than what we thought. And I want to mention them to explain what it was. To achieve and to receive the folders, you need to be an attorney. So the attorneys went to some institutions to discover that those which were detained since such a long time, they might have been relocated, there was a hurricane, there was a flood, so the dockets could not be found. The second element was that the families were in need to be involved in an action which was promoting their freedom. 30 years means that the families migrated, the address that was in the folder was not the real address anymore, probably they relocated. It was also meaning that new generation in the family didn't know about those people. They forgot about them. They were not even born when they were detained. And also there is another element which needs to be considered, which is the financial burden. Because if you get out one of those people, you have to have evidence that they will be accommodated in an appropriate place in the family with infrastructures and network working around them. And they have a probation officer which is overviewing his situation. Most of the families, after so many years, were not particularly enthusiastic in taking back home somebody which might have been heavily mentally ill, also due to the incarceration. So they were in need to medical assistance, psychiatric assistance, monthly medication. Most of them have physical damages. Some are incontinent, some cannot walk anymore, some are half blind. So for the family, it was really not easy to. Some heroes did it. We have especially one which was in the media in the last days, George Williams.
Yes.
And George, there was the commitment of stand-up, which has been financially contributing, but there was also a strong commitment from the family. One of the family members migrated just to make sure that she could send every month the money to pay for him. So this full process has been very slow, and also the outcomes of where to put them, because you cannot get them out and maybe you risk they end up in the middle of the road. That won't be a progress. So,
Carlot, hold that thought for me. I have to take the break. But when we return, I want us to discuss, follow up on the issue that you're mentioning, public safety. But in some instances, the family is willing to support, but the lethargy of the system has caused further harm. And I want us to pick up on the inquiry report that was done following Noel Chambers' matter being brought to the public. But we take the break. Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We're talking about the injustices that have been meted out to persons who are deemed unfit to stand trial, unfit to plead as a result of varying mental health or illness or incapacities, if you will. And I think the nation saw this Sunday Gleaner article, and it brought back to home, to the front, to the fore, the issues that continue to plague our justice system. We're joined by Carla Gulato, the Executive Director of Stand Up for Jamaica, and she was explaining to us that when you have a slow pace in the justice system, where the state fails persons for decades, how it can impact the ability of family members to provide support for these individuals, even when there is a willingness, how it leads to dockets being lost, and so on. And then we're going to be talking about when the state fails to uphold the human rights of people. We saw $6 million being provided to an individual who was incarcerated, imprisoned, locked away for 50 years without ever standing trial. And the state saw it fit to provide $6 million Jamaican dollars for those loss of income, deprivation of liberty. That was what the state found appropriate. And by the way, just to indicate, that was an increased amount from, I believe, the initial $3 million Jamaican dollars. Carlo, you were saying?
I am listening to you because this is a failure of the state, but it's also an outrage, because you have somebody which has been incarcerated for 50 years with no trial. I remember the day when we were able finally to bring him to court and got him out. He was small, short, he was sitting on the bench, he didn't know what was going on, he was keeping asking where I am, can I get a beer, who is that person? He was completely lost. It was so terrible to see him like this. But on the other hand, there was the full family which was willing to help. And I think that I want to know, for example, what is the evaluation of the state to say that what they can pay for as compensation as a value of 6 million, which is 4,000 US. As I said, he is in need of care because he's well deteriorated. So we try to contribute. We have other people which I have to thank you for sending some little money for him to make the money for the end of the month, because in this moment he's not even at home anymore. He's in a sort of clinic because he needs a nurse 24 hours because he's incontinent, he has diabetes, he has moments where he does not remember where he is, etc., etc. So he needs some...
In this economic climate where the inflation wipes out anything at all.
Just to let you know that the famous 6 million that they would love to give to George have been abundantly spent already to keep him where he is for a year. So it is really unfortunate. I have seen a lot of comments which were commenting exactly the fact that what happened to George is unacceptable.
Yes.
We are trying to organize a GoFundMe, we are trying to organize a petition. Let's see where we can reach. If anybody is willing to help, I am very grateful because, as I said, the situation is very tough.
Please bring JFJ in to support Carla. And just to reiterate that point that you made, Stand Up for Jamaica is looking to support George, you know, and you said a GoFundMe account. So for those who are listening in, and I know Bridge has a wide platform of people overseas, I'm going to be leaving you can send an email. You can go on JFJ's platform. I'm going to ask Carla to share her email as well for Stand Up, so people can find out how exactly to support. But Carla, you can share those details before I even continue. But for those who are listening in, you can email admin@Jamaicans with the S, FOR, justice.org. admin@jamaicansforjustice.org, and whatever support you can provide or further information, we will turn it over to Stand Up for Jamaica. But Carla, if you could just share the details for how people can support.
You can write me. You cannot support me because I cannot do any GoFundMe from Jamaica. So I actually have tried to find somebody which is abroad.
Oh, you haven't done it yet? Okay.
No,
but they can send an email to maybe get banking details, and that can be shared.
And my personal email, it is Carla, C-A-R-L-A, Jamaica, one word, 51@gmail.com, which means Carla Jamaica 51@gmail.com. If you want to contact me, I'll be happy. And if I can share something with you, I also will be happy to.
So, Carla, I'm willing to assist from JFJ with just some communication. We share it on our platforms and so on to see what we can do.
That's nice.
But just to shift focus a little.
What I wanted to focus, how many Judge Williams we have.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at those which are still incarcerated, most of them are detained at Tower Street. It's over 170 because we took out some. You were able to count a couple of them. Legal aid, which got funds from the Ministry of Justice, did not do a good job because they got only 3 out from the prison. But Minister, when the Indecom report came out, it was a sort of boom, right? Everybody was talking about. So Minister Samuda has opened an infirmary at Tambourine Farm, which is an institution, which is a farm, and the level of security are not very high. This infirmary is professional, but is small because they can maximum host, I think, 22 or 20 or 22 people. I went to see it. It looks really as it should be, an infirmary. They are free, they are moving around, there is a nurse, there is a doctor, but it does not cover the majority of the cases.
But Carla, I remember, and so I just want to put another thing in context. There was a report that is titled Mental Health Offenders Inquiry Committee Report. And that was following the Indecom's report that had brought again to the public light on Noel Chambers. And there were several recommendations in that report that, for example, there was an inconsistency in how we defined the standard of what fitness to plead means to ensure that people's deprivation of liberty is not being denied. Your liberty is not being deprived without that standard test, so to speak, where things can be applied equally based on the circumstances. That was one issue. The other issue was how the court should deal with those defendants found unfit to plead in terms of ensuring, again, that public interest and safety is maintained. But where the family is able and willing to support, those individuals should be released to their families. But there was also a commitment made by Dr. Christopher Tufton, I believe, at the time, that the state would have moved towards building a large facility to house these individuals. I don't remember that ever being done. So following that committee's report, can you recall, Carla, what were some of the main actions done by the state to say that they're really treating this with the seriousness that it deserves?
First of all, I want to make a point. What you mentioned is assessment.
Yes.
Nobody's assessing people when they go to court, because when we say mental illness, it is not one disease. As you say, illness. It can be different pathologies.
Yes.
So those pathologies need to be recognized in order to see how best you can cure a person. This does not exist. So we have been approaching at the time the Ministry of Health, and we still have ongoing a dialogue about early assessment in general, not only for people in prison. Diversion from detention, networking to support the family, and as much as possible, inclusion in in their community as far as they are not dangerous to themselves or to others. The ministry has been mobilizing a little, but then with the COVID, most of the financial resources were diverted. But one of the things which was supposed to happen and it didn't was to refurbish Bellevue.
Yes.
We went to do an inspection. Half of it is closed. There is not even the fencing anymore. Goats are going around. And there are long-term people which are innocent. They don't give any troubles, like old ladies, etc., etc. But the function and the role of a Bellevue should be much more wider and should allow to host quite an amount of people, which is not. Now there is a new CEO which has been in charge since 3 months, and I should meet with the new CEO next week, and let's see if we can proceed. But behind all of that, there must be a legislative change which is stating that mentally ill do not end up in prison.
But Carla, before you move on, I wanted to clarify, because we've seen the social media post on Bellevue Hospital, and it looks good, it looks calm, it looks like a serene environment. Explain to the listeners the difference between what is on social media versus what you're seeing.
Well, I think that we all know that social media can show some situations which are not exactly the real one. I know that some efforts have been made. As I said, we went, but there is the need of much more work, and much more commitment, and much more investment.
And whether or not that hospital would be the space to host.
Right. Yeah. And also remember, when we talk about these places, there is one in Kingston and there is Cornwall Hospital, which has a psychiatrist ward in Montego Bay. But we could utilize an amount of shelters which are in all over the island. For example, Stand Up works with the homeless shelter in Port Antonio, where we do rehab, because most of the homeless are mental. So we have programs for them, they do activities, they have cure, they have recreation. Some of them now are going to school to heart. That is the project which should be implemented to avoid that this monster situation repeats themselves. Because you see, George, or 3 more or 4 more that we take out from the prison, there will be somebody else going in.
Yeah.
There will be a next one which is going to be admitted by a court, unless there will be a substantial change in terms of the approach to mental illness in general, but specifically when they are in conflict with the law.
All right, we're running out of time, Carla, so just last word from you. What is your last call on this particular issue?
My last call is that everybody please mobilize, because people read the newspaper and say, oh my God, and then tomorrow they go back to their home and their quiet situation.
Yeah.
I'm asking everybody to take a stand, because it's a problem which is a general problem, is increasing and is affecting a whole heap of people. Stand up and fight.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Carla. I appreciate you always. That was Carla Gulato, the Executive Director of Stand Up for Jamaica. We take the break and we return with some more. Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. You know, it was quite a heavy topic that we were discussing, and it's always one of those things we hope Jamaicans will stand up, as Carla just said, and let the state, our parliamentarians, those within the agencies know that we won't stand for what we have seen. Much more is needed, and as usual, it's the most marginalized among us that are subjected to these injustices. Persons from the working class poor, those who already can't afford it. So it's one of those things that are multiple and layered. Already you are suffering through deprivation of liberty. But again, it's who is suffering is always the thing for us to consider. And that is why sometimes when we speak and we become vocal on issues, the Bail Act, the mandatory minimum, I want the listeners to disabuse of themselves that somehow challenging those positions mean that you're supporting criminality. What we're saying is that those who are likely to suffer the injustices at the hand of the state would be those who can't afford the attorneys, can't afford to pursue an appeal all the way up to Privy Council. We have to go get visa and all of these requirements. So I want us to think on these things. And to segue into another issue that I saw a senator who went on the political platform. They didn't call JFJ's name, but they mentioned a lobby group, for example, that the legislator should ignore the lobby group, who is saying that the current mandatory minimum is far too excessive. Let me advise listeners that when it comes to capital murder, there's already two things that an individual who's found guilty can face based on law: life imprisonment or the death penalty. The existing prescribed minimum for capital murder is 20 years. It's just that the government want to increase it to 45 or 50 years. And what we're saying is that it is excessive because you need room for negotiation. The judges to look at the circumstances of each case and say, this is what I'm willing to impose. For non-capital murder, it's life imprisonment. It's just that the starting point is 15 years. And the government wants to introduce it to 45. What we're saying again, you need room for negotiation to take place where the judges can say, based on this particular crime, it shocks the public's conscience. It is so heinous that though the starting point is 15, I think I'm going to be adding on years. So nobody is saying that those who are found guilty of murder should be released. And I want us to listen to those who make public utterances. Listen from an informed perspective so that people do not play into our fears where bad laws are passed that will likely affect the most marginalized and vulnerable in our population. And as Justice Sykes, who participated in an interview with Dion Jackson Miller, said, the legislator can do what they want, but the public must be prepared for the consequences. When you have an aging prison population, for example, you have to go consider diabetes and all of these things. Who's going to be paying for it? When you have court backlogs based on every single evidence we have looked at in North America, court backlogs are inevitable. Then people start suing the state, challenging the lawsuits, the terms of imprisonment, my apologies. When the backlogs are there, your matter, for example, someone who was victimized by sexual assault and other matters of that nature that is heard at the Supreme Court, when you have backlogs, it means that there is a delay in those matters being heard before the court. So I want people to again, disabuse themselves of the public utterances to suggest that persons who are found guilty of capital or non-capital murder, they're going to be released in society with low sentences. That is not the case. That is not the case. And I challenge our legislator to pass laws based on evidence. And I ask, what is the mischief that they're trying to solve? Other than trying to say to the public that something is somehow being done. That is the only thing. So I want us to look from an informed perspective. The other thing I want to quickly mention, we've been watching the Klansman gang trial. And I hope the public was paying attention to how sentences are handed down. And I'm heartened by the efforts of Chief Justice Brian Sykes, where he took his time to explain how he arrived at the sentences based on what is provided for in law, but also the varying mitigating and aggravating factors. So we saw, for example, the leader of the gang being sentenced to 39 years, 6 months. People are saying it is not enough based on all of the alarming things that they were found guilty of, all of the things that came out in trial. But it is something for us to ponder how we perhaps may revisit how the anti-gang legislation works, what provisions they are, as we deal with the criminal gangs in the country. But this was a good day for law enforcement, a good day for society. And I think we need more of the gang elements being brought before the court. But again, back to the point I was making, I'm happy that Chief Justice took time to explain these matters, and the public had an opportunity to listen in so you understand how sentencing is done. It was a good day for us being informed on these matters. And the last point I want to mention, we've heard some public utterances from parliamentarians on the political platform, and JFJ, where it is applicable within our mandate, we've challenged some of them and we've urged the leaders to do better. And it is for that reason that we have been calling for the political ombudsman to be reinstated. And I see where Citizens Action for Free and Fair Elections Cafe have joined that call as well just last week. Just last week, I heard Minister Delroy Chuck saying that the Parliament, through his office, is going to be making a cabinet submission to have the political ombudsman subsumed in the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. Cafe disagrees. JFJ, we don't have a position on that office being subsumed right now. But what we are saying, until that is done, put forward a political ombudsman so we can have someone who is the referee of sort that will bring some political decorum so that we can exercise our right to vote in a free and fair election without any commentary that is vile or commentary that is unbecoming of the office that these aspiring leaders are trying to hold. So just wanted to reiterate or bring into perspective some of these things. Also, I haven't had any winner of the double trivia, the special one, but we do have a winner that is on Instagram. In Dax We Trust is the winner for this week's trivia. He correctly notes 40 years. Noel Chambers was detained for 40 years, 4 decades, at Tower Street Adult Correctional Facility without a trial. So in Dax We Trust, thank you so much for participating and congrats. Our team will reach out to you for that credit to be given to you. But as usual, as we close out, we just want to say thanks to our listeners, our partner agencies who continue to support JFJ. We appreciate your efforts always, and we hope that you have a very good week and keep up with our social media platforms. We will keep you updated on the issues. Thanks again. My name is Mikkel Jackson, Executive Director of JFJ.